All right, welcome back to Resilient Voices and Beyond. I'm so excited for today's episode. I have a dear friend. At some point, I've done some work with her. I'm just excited, and I'm gonna let her introduce herself a little bit later. But beforehand, I cannot start this episode without giving my thanks and my gratitude to all of you guys supporting me, all of you guys continuing to be in my corner, showing up and being guests, liking, subscribing, all these great things. Truly, I could not do this without you guys. And I cannot say it enough. Y'all probably gonna get tired of me like, whatever, this is all you. But no, it's truly you guys because I could not and would not be able to do all this without you guys. So thank you for that. Believe this is episode 20. What did I just say? 28. Episode 28. See, my mind, I'm getting old. Episode 28 of season 2. So we rolling, and I have a couple more episodes coming up for you guys before we end out season 2. But we're rolling. I'm so excited. If you so happen to stumble across this podcast, because I gotta forgive me, I got gum in my mouth, and I probably shouldn't have. If you so happen to stumble across this podcast and you don't know who I am or what this dude is talking about, somebody just gave you this link and told you to listen to it. My name is Michael D. Davis Thomas, aka MDDT Speaks. I spent a little bit over 11 years in the Michigan child welfare system, part of that being on the juvenile side, part of that being on the foster care side. I did age out. Unfortunately, I did not have any experience in any kind of foster home or adoptive home. Most of my experience were in residential settings, congregate care, if you know it by that. I was very institutionalized. I experienced a lot of PTSD due to my experience being in care, and prior to my experience being in care, I experienced abuse of multiple different kinds, but this is not about me. Reason that I'm here, reason I have this podcast is I wanted to pave a way for other people to be able to share their stories, but also to educate and have outreach and hope that we can create the conversations, if not start, the steps towards transformative change in the child welfare system and beyond. So that's a little bit about me. Without further ado, I'm going to have my guest introduce herself.
Hey everyone, I'm Bobbi Taylor. I am currently a consultant for a bunch of nonprofits and child welfare agencies across the country. Much like Michael, I entered the juvenile justice and foster care system at 12, and I stayed in that system for 7 years and aged out of care. So when I aged out of care, I was exposed to youth engagement spaces, right? And at first I was kind of like, I've been doing programming for 7 years and I'm cool on the programming side. But once I went in there and they had pizza, right? I was like, pizza's my favorite. I'm in there. I saw so many young people doing something to change the system and not be complacent. And so that's what really drove me into this career. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me and a little bit about my experience without telling all the details too soon. So thank you for having me, Michael. It is a pleasure being in community and space with you. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation on your podcast.
Awesome. It's such a privilege to have you on. I know you're a very busy woman, but appreciate you taking the time to speak with me and speak with my audience. So I'm gonna just get right into it. My first question, and this question derives, from my experience. Just as much like you starting out in engagement, but for me, my experience, I experienced a lot of tokenism. I experienced a lot of going to panels and they had scripts already laid out for me of what they wanted me to say specifically about my story and how they wanted me to say it. Now, in my own stage, in my own platform, One of the pieces of bringing people on here is to be real, raw, and authentic, but also be professional about it. I'm not trying to shame or talk down on anybody, but one thing is promoting and sharing the real truths about our experiences and the system as a whole. So my first question is, when did your story begin? To whatever depths, to whatever comfortability you feel comfortable sharing, feel free.
Yeah. So my story really begins when I was 2. I was absolutely a candidate for foster care at that age and continued to be a candidate for foster care all the way until the system got involved, right? My mom was low income. There was a lot of abuse going on inside of the home, mentally, physically. We were exposed to a lot of unsafe situations. I truly feel that because she could name drop a prestigious community member in our community, that when the system did get involved for an investigation, we were kind of swept under the rug, right? So I was one of those young children that should have been protected by the system, but instead, because of bias and because of relationships and who's powerful in the community, it was swept under the rug, right? And so moving forward, I'm busy, excuse my little.
You cut out a little bit. I don't know. See, it was a notification.
It was the notification. I apologize. So because I remained in the home, I continued to experience what I experienced. But by the time I got old enough to understand what was happening, by the time I was old enough to have trusted adults at school telling me drugs are bad, you should never be exposed to drugs, and knowing they were at my home, I started to question my upbringing. I started to question the childhood that I was exposed to, right? That is everything that I knew. And so I thought it was completely normalized until I had those trusted adults in my system and in proximity, that I started to question things. And because I was not prepared to deal with them, I started avoiding school, right? And that's where the juvenile justice system comes in, because they're like, oh, you don't want to go to school, your grades are dropping, these truancy cases are happening, right? Like, we're going to punish you for not going to school. And that was really my first entry into the system. Was nothing criminal to the extent that an adult would get criminalized, but really their way of criminalizing young people, which is going to school. And I think the biggest failure on the system was, rather than punishing me for school, they never initially asked, why are you not going to school? What is the reason that you are avoiding school? And so from then, because I felt like they didn't care, because they didn't ask, and it was more of a punishment than anything. It wasn't help. It was a punishment of me not going to school and being put under these probation conditions. It didn't work out for me, right? Like, it was a penalty, and I was like, you know what? Like, I'm not going to do it, right? Like, I was very defiant, and I was very much, I'm an independent person. I've been taking care of myself and my household for the past 6 years as a child. I can take care of myself moving forward. So I ended up continuing to spiral down this trend of not going to school and increasing my probation stay. And then, the consequences got a little bit more severe, and I started getting placed into group homes and congregate settings and those types of institutions. And so we would go back and forth between a congregate care setting to me being on the streets for 9 months, right? Because I would run away. I knew how to take care of myself. And so we would go through this pattern until finally, I was placed in a pretty lockdown facility. And that's when I started kind of to open up about the experiences that I had at home. And it wasn't until that point that they said, oh, well, we can't send you back home if those are the conditions that you've been exposed to, right? And I'm like, hold on, like, this is what I've been experiencing since I was 2, right? But now it's a problem. And you could have just asked me that when I first entered the system. So that was the point that I was duly adjudicated into foster care and juvenile justice. And again, similar to you, Michael, I never really found my forever home. It was placement after placement after placement. I did get lucky and I was able to find a foster home 2 weeks before I aged out. But again, I feel like the foster mom was more worried about the money because she's like, oh, we'll keep her for 2 weeks. But after her 2 weeks is done and she's 19, like, we don't have any responsibility over her. Right. So I was left homeless leaving that court system for the last time. And thankfully, I had rekindled a relationship with my sister where I was able to stay at her house until I got on my feet. But the journey of the system, I would say, is every single aspect of the system that we like to focus on, whether that's transitioning out of care, whether that's homelessness, whether that is a substance abuse or family well-being prevention. All of these different aspects I ended up experiencing growing up in the system, right? And so I feel like all of these different aspects that the system is currently working on are very they are very intertwined, right? And so that is a little bit of why I love the work that I do, is because you can't have a conversation about housing without understanding the significance of workforce or development or transitioning out of care. You can't have the conversation of benefits without realizing that, oh, young people need supports like this to be able to be successful, knowing that they don't have any concrete supports outside of it, right? So yeah, I will stop there and let you ask any follow-up questions.
So I'm just processing all that you have been through. And for me, I hear a lot of similarities. And first and foremost, before I even go into this, you decided to match me today. I'm looking. But I was just listening, and I'm like, when you were speaking about your experience at a young age, being in that home, and because, people knew who or what, it was kind of like a scapegoating situation there, and I can resonate with that. I'm not going to say I can relate completely because your story is unique to yourself, but I can resonate with that because at an early age for myself, I know you know a little bit of my story, but for some of you guys that may just be tuning in, just tuning in for this episode, I experienced physical abuse and sexual abuse for years, and I cried out for help in the best way as a kid knew how. Like, I don't think I was direct, like, as I could say now as an adult, like, hey, look, this is happening, this is wrong. But I tried my best as a young kid, asking questions like, is this supposed to be happening or what, and it never resonated with any of my teachers or any community members. So I was stuck in a situation, and when I started getting mad, and when I started slapping people, quite frankly, it's not appropriate. I'm not glorifying, violence or anything, for some of you guys out there. I ain't trying to make nobody mad. But it is what happened when I started to retaliate to the abuse, when I psychologically numbed out because the words of "I wish you were aborted" or "I hate you" started to sink in, and I started to believe that this person truly did not love me. My mom did not love me and wished that I was unalived. I had no more care in this world, so I started at, I think it was 11 for me. You said 12, you entered. It was 11 my first night in juvenile. And I remember the police coming to get me, and they came to get me as if I had a warrant for robbing a bank. There was
Okay.
several police cars. You know, I had guns drawn at me. I had, I was a little stocky little kid, so they had to handcuff me with two handcuffs because my hands wouldn't go back. You know,
It's not
but
funny, Michael. It's not funny.
um, like I remember at an early age being criminalized, and I'm like, how do we get from help to this is your fault?
Mm.
And I can resonate with what you said about now you're in there, okay? The whole arrest intake process. No one is asking questions about why you're not going to school. No one's asking questions about why you was out there fighting people in the community.
Mm.
Why you out there running? Why are you out there selling drugs? You were 11 years old. Like, why are you out here doing these things? And I feel like there's such a double standard, to adolescent care between foster care and juvenile. Like, it should not matter the title. There's therapeutic intervention that needs to be done, and there's questions that need to be asked. Just like, they do those interviews with foster youth, and y'all gonna have to forgive me, forensic interviews, and do that much investigating, and it needs to happen on the same effort. What is youth now?
Yeah, let me tell you something, Michael. And I've held this belief for a very, very long time. I would say that 80% of the young people who enter juvenile justice are candidates for foster care. And I think the biggest detrimental mistake that systems are making is they are not being intentional in centering that young person, and they continue to place them back in the environments in which they were not thriving in anyway, right? We look at this analogy around, you don't, like the plant, right? If the plant is not growing, you change the environment, right? If a young person is not being successful, and they may be, in a situation where they have bad influences, or their parents can't afford the bills, and so a lot of responsibility is put on them, so they are going out selling drugs, they are going in and doing robberies, or whatever the case is, right? Or they are finding community because they can't find community inside of their home. If you're not looking at those factors and you place this child in a juvenile justice facility, and let's get into that, because let me tell you, they're treating young people, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, just like a grown adult, strip searches, all that. We'll get into that in a second. But you're putting them in a condition that is criminalizing and institutionalizing, and then you're sending them to a program where they may have a little bit of stability, right? They may have a little bit of stability, and not all the time. But I would say Boys Town was a pretty good placement for me. And then you say, okay, we know that you can do good. We know that you can behave, and we know that you can be successful. We're going to put you right back in this environment that you came from, not understanding that young people need better environments to go home to. So instead of criminalizing that young person, talk to mom, talk to grandma, talk to the people in the community. What can be done to make that environment a better environment for young people? Or what can be done to foster success into those young people, right? Like when we're looking at juvenile justice young people, it's kind of like we're giving them this cookie cutter society idea of what a young person should be doing, but we're never giving them or cultivating the opportunities for them to be successful. If a young person said they wanted to be a music artist, okay, I don't see the system saying, I know a community-based organization that I can connect you to for you to put your energy into that music. If a young person said they wanted to do volleyball, I don't see anybody in the community stepping up and saying, I have a scholarship for a prestigious volleyball team that I want you to be on because I believe in you, right? We are like penalizing and providing punitive supports for young people when really we need to be cultivating opportunities of purpose and opportunities of growth, instead of saying you're the problem and we need to fix you. Okay, I'm done on my little TED talk.
I couldn't have said that any better. One piece that you said that stuck out to me was and hopefully I'm not drawing a brain fart here. There's a couple things. And the other one will come back to me, but the other thing is about placements in
Mm,
itself. Like you talked about, you kind of went over like the strip searching and everything, and I know things may be different now, but 11-year-old me going into juvenile, um, I could not sleep in the pants and shirt that they gave me that said Oakland County Children's Village, Detroit JDF, or whichever juvenile I was at the time. I couldn't sleep. I slept in the tidy whities they gave me and socks because they didn't allow me to wear pants for whatever reason. I couldn't take my slides in, and I had the option of either bringing in my sweatshirt or my regular shirt. And then they gave me a blanket. I don't know if y'all know about those old hospital blankets that like they had those little small squares that were holes. Like, so it really wasn't keeping me warm, and then I had like a very thin plastic pad, it's supposed to be a mattress and one single pillow. I promise you, I was more comfortable on the concrete slab with my blanket balled up. That's how it's up, balled up, freezing cold, balled up. Just thinking about everything that's happened to me and how I'm here. Than anything. But I gave you guys that detail because take into account my experience prior to being in the juvenile. My actions that were criminal were because I was in a survival state. Being at home was no longer safe for me. So I got people, I would sell drugs, I would street fight, I would run away, I will pay people who were homeless or were adults after I sold drugs or, street fought, made enough money to buy me a hotel. Sometimes I couldn't get a hotel, so I had to sleep out on the streets, but sometimes I got caught. My mom would send people after me. I remember one time my mom sent people after me, 4 drug dealers that were sitting on the corner. I'll pay y'all $20 if y'all catch them. They caught me. My mom beat me with everything in the book. So running away wasn't always the best option. But, that's what happened. But I didn't even get arrested at 11 because of any of those criminal behaviors, which were rightfully so. I should have been arrested. But I got arrested after an argument with my mom. And I told the cops that, hey, I get I was probably in the wrong, but I've been in here and this and this and this has happened to me. The cop told me to shut up and just handcuffed me, and that was it, So now my whole juvenile experience was not me getting to a place of, oh, okay, yeah, this may be helpful and I may learn my lesson. This is me becoming harder. I'm sleeping in how is this supposed to help me when I get back home to want to be better? I'm angry. I'm fed up. And I'm only getting more angry at the world and whoever led to me led to me getting in here, because I'm sleeping in my underwear with socks. They're more likely ain't even my size. I got a shower and I can't even close the door. I've been sexually abused. And I had a staff member telling me you got 5 minutes. In the shower and you got hot water. So how is any of that? I don't care what you've done. And I know some people have done some really messed up things as juveniles that have led to them being a juvenile. But at the end of the day, a kid is a kid. It is our job as adults and as people that are in society to make sure that whatever mistake that they made is corrected with mental health services, in a nurturing environment to help them be more loved, more safe, or more secure, whatever it is. But more times than not, stability is at the center of why they're there, because they come from dysfunctionality, or broken homes, or single parent homes, and granted, Not and that doesn't mean that the single parent home is bad, but it just means that there's been some missing pieces, and this individual doesn't know how to deal with not having mom around, or doesn't know how to deal without having dad around. So there's so many different scenarios and so many different things, but I feel like there's a conversation that needs to be had, which is why I took some time out of your story to uplift this about how we're treating one side versus the other when both have some issues that needs to be faced, because they would send me back home. They would send me back home. I would do a program, go back home, same environment. That's what that's what it was. That's where my brain part came in. I would go home, then do the group sessions, do the kumbaya, pick up some stuff, and I would go back home and try to, like, my family started tripping. My family started to get ready to hit me. My family started cussing me out. Hey, y'all, let's have a group session. You know, like, that's what my family would look at me like I'm crazy, because the techniques that they told me to do when crisis arise wasn't fitting a family that, okay, Michael went and he got his help, but who helped them?
Nobody, right?
Where was the court order therapy for them? You know,
nobody lays their feet up for that. And honestly, let's be a little bit real. Are the things that they're giving us in these programs really realistic, right? Are they culturally appropriate? Are they realistic? Are they responsive to the things that are happening real time? Probably not. These are like, in theory, in a research environment that is semi-controlled, these things can work. Okay, but there are so many variables and so many different pieces that these things are not transferable to the communities that you are forcing them on. And so that's really what I have to say about that. But it's true, right? Maybe grandma is taking care of the kids and she's working 3 jobs, and so she can't be at home. Right? She can't be at home. And so it's hard for a young person to get to school. How are you going to fix that? Right? How are you going to fix that? How are you going to make sure a young person is getting to school if that's the problem? They're not looking at the entire family dynamic of making that child the most successful, cared for, that they can be. Instead, they're looking at the child like, oh, you're supposed to go to school. You're supposed to do this. You're 12 years old and you're more than capable, right? But like, if a child is battling the absence of love in their home, that's a completely different story too, right? There's so many variables. And I think another misstep of the system is that these cases are very relationship based. They are very relationship dynamic. There are a lot of variables that go into human centered work. But they continue to force kind of like these, again, cookie cutter solutions on people without accounting for the emotions, the different aspects that come into really cultivating the conditions for young people to be successful, not only a young person, but their families to be successful and thrive. I kind of want to visit back to the experience of going into a juvenile justice facility. Let me tell you, in the state of Nebraska, you do not hit the age of majority until 19, right? But at 18, you could still find your way into county, and that's exactly what happened to me. And I will tell you, hands down, that the experience that I had in county for 8 months, 9 months, whatever it was more beneficial to me than the juvenile justice facility. And the county jail, we cooked the food that the juveniles had to eat, right? So I'm cooking their food, but I'm going to a bunk that has way more self-care items. I'm going to a bunk that has sheets, that has a better bed, a better pillow, multiple pairs of clothes, right? Even though they're scrubs. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, the things that we are allowing our children to sit through, where they have 1 or 2 pairs of outfits that are scrubs, they have holes in them, they're tattered. We're giving them the dispenser soap that you get in the public restroom as body wash, shampoo, and conditioner, right? The incentives are you get Suave. If you have a good day today, the incentive is you get Suave for your shower, okay? The incentive is, if you're good today, we will give you grease for your hair. And those things are absolutely mandatory. Those are not incentives. comfortable sleep is mandatory. It is not an incentive. But we are continuing to allow children to be exposed to these conditions, and we just say, oh, it's better for them, and the system knows what they're doing. But they really don't, right? Because I've seen it firsthand that the county jail, the things that adults have or have access to, is 10 times better than what we are giving our children. Even though the experience is the same, the strip search, the punitive disciplinary actions, the food, all of those different things, those aspects are the same. But the conditions that we are exposing them to, or the opportunity to have a little bit better or a little bit more of a comfortable stay in your situation, the county jail is 10 times better. And then from there, I heard that prison was 10 times more better than the county jail, right? So like, what are we really doing to our children, and why are we settling for less when all they deserve is love, compassion, and patience, really, right? Because you can have the most hard individual come into your space, and I promise, if you spend 60 days with them consistently and show them unconditional love or support, you're going to see the child inside of them. But people don't take that risk, and people like to put these boundaries up. And I believe that in this work, there are some boundaries needed, but to be unconditionally supportive of a young person is not a boundary that needs to be set.
Definitely. Statistically, I'm an anomaly, and I like, for me, and it's weird to say it that way, because the opportunities that were given to me and opportunities that were taken was supposed to lead me to jail to prison, or hooked on drugs, or having 5-6 kids already out here, and no money to pay for them, or death. Those are my options as, who has been introduced child welfare system of time, whether it be juvenile or foster care. Those are my options statistically, because I can't speak today, of what I'm supposed to go into, or how I'm supposed to react to my trauma, to say that. You spoke about one thing, and then I'm going to transition to another part of another question that I have. And you spoke about, a grandparent taken care of, and a grandparent has to work, and the kid has to find a way to school, or having difficulty with school. Unfortunately, we live in a society today where that can be a very nurturing and loving home. Unfortunately, there is an issue with getting to school. That kid ends up being taken. Instead of aiding funds, transportation, for that grandparent or for that kid to be somewhere where it's culturally appropriate, where there's love, where there's food, where there's family, we remove kids in circumstances like that, because they're one little bit, they not making it to school, and truancy, or whatever, they keep, I love them, they keep being late, but they show up, but they keep being late. Like, do it really matter that I was late to class a couple times? Like, this, it'd be crazy, because I know some people who are A students, like, and they had CPS being called on them because they were late. And the parents, like, unfortunately, they live on the other side of town. And I don't know how many people may be listening, but I'm from Detroit. There was, I can't remember what year, there was a year where they closed over like 200 different schools. And they had to bring all those students together. So that means parents who are working minimum wage jobs have to figure out some way to get up extra early to make sure they make it to their shift, but also get their kids to school. Plus, public transportation is not all that dependable. Rain, sleet, or snow, they're going to be out there, but rain, sleet, or snow, they may be late. And unfortunately, we see situations like this where it's not always bad. What we deem as neglect isn't really neglect. You know, poverty shouldn't be a reason for neglect. We should be
We
helping people.
are, yeah, we're punishing poverty. And I say we because we haven't fixed it yet. So we're still contributing to that same system, even if we are moving mountains to change it. We are still punishing poverty, and we are still targeting Black and Brown families and young people. And I wholeheartedly believe that.
Definitely. My next question, because we talked about we built a timeline from your very young adolescence, from like age 2 to transitioning.
Yeah.
So if you could walk us through transitioning from high school to adulthood, what barriers, what struggles,
Mm.
what obstacles, did you face in that time period to
Yeah.
your now?
You know what? I had children very, very early. So I got pregnant with my first child at 19. And he changed my life. And I have 3 other children on top of that. He changed my life. And so that path that you were talking about, I saw it for myself. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna be the baddest criminal out here. I'm gonna be a career criminal, right? And so that's what I saw for myself until I saw him, because when I was in the county jail, I witnessed a mother give birth inside of the county jail and have the baby taken away from her 2 days later. And I knew after having him, I could never stomach or survive him being taken away from me, right? So I changed my life, and it was hard. It was hard at first. I didn't have any supports as a young parent. When you think about the traditional support that you have and the grandparents that are super excited to like take care of their baby, or, their grandbaby for the weekend, that didn't exist. Childcare, like navigating resources. I've never had my kids in a childcare center, one, because of the reviews that they have and how unsafe they are, but 2, the resources are extremely hard to navigate. I spent a majority of my early years kind of going through these just entry level jobs that everybody would go to, Buffalo Wild Wings, Dunkin' Donuts. I had like a few factory jobs, and they were really to pay the bills for myself. But I think the biggest thing that I had an issue with was probably not having a concrete support system for myself or for my family. Even though I had, my partner's family at the time, or my ex-partner's family at the time. So not having anyone to count on my end, but 2, not having financial resources when things got really hard, right? When things got really hard and I was in a rut, I think that was probably the biggest barrier. I can name an example. I wrote about it for the Children's Bureau. We had a car, and money was really tight. It was Christmas time. It was around Thanksgiving. The weather was really bad, and our wheel was messed up. I think it was like the rotor or something like that. I don't really remember, but it was pretty expensive to get it. And it was either paying for the rotor or putting the money up for our rent, right? Because we were strapped for cash. It was like paycheck to paycheck with 2 kids, bills and all of those things. And our logic was, if we pay for the wheel today, then we can go to work and we can make the money back to pay for our rent. We paid for the wheel, and 2 days later it broke down again. It was a completely different problem. So we still had a barrier of getting to work. Had I just had someone to say, I had to pay for my car to get fixed, it's still not fixed, I need $600 to pay my rent so I can figure out how to get my car fixed after that, or I need someone to help me fix my car so that way I can go to work and make the money. Had I had that prevention focused resource in the community, I wouldn't have gone through what I went through. From that point, we didn't have our rent paid on time. Our car was still broken. We were really strapped for cash, and we had to cancel some of our shifts. And because of that, right, like we had an eviction notice, right? Because of that, we kind of spiraled into this situation of financial stress and de-stress with a child, with a baby at home. And it took us a couple of months to dig us out of the hole. It took us a couple of months to actually prove to the system that we were in need so they could cover our rent costs, right? When I could have called them at, you know, the end of November and saying, I need this. Instead, I was met with, you need an eviction notice before we can pay for anything, right? I need you to pay my electric bill. You need a shut off notice before we pay anything. But I had known that I needed that support right then and there. And so those are some of the barriers that I've experienced. It wasn't until I was about 23 and I was exposed to a training. I think you're very familiar with this, the Youth Thrive training, and it was the brain development. And when I looked at that brain development training, I was like, hold on, you're telling me that my brain isn't even developed until 26. You're telling me that I am in control of rewiring my brain, and that when I expose myself to healthy conditions and healthy thought patterns and all of these different things, that I can literally just feel better. That training changed my life. And so after I was exposed to that training, I started to bet on myself. I was like, you know what? I am capable. I am capable of making systems change. I am capable of being my own boss. I am capable of being the change that I needed so desperately, not only a year ago, but 22 years ago, right? When I was just a baby in that home. I'm capable. And so I started to live my life like that and lead my life like that and lead it with purpose and really put myself in positions that allow me to feel like I'm making a contribution and that it's purposeful and not tokenistic. And from then, a lot of doors have opened, right? Because I began to bet on myself. So I will say that training really changed my life. But I will also say that it is within each of us that we have to decide that we are good enough, that we are capable enough, and we have to examine our own healing in order to be able to do what we were meant to do. Everyone's here for a reason. Everyone's here for a purpose. And it's just, it really has to be us to make a decision on whether we're going to act on it or, you know, continue to be complacent.
Wow. It's you know, first and foremost, it's such an honor. I appreciate you being so open and vulnerable and transparent about your obstacles and your story, you know, and what you went through. I got a couple more questions. These may dive a little bit deeper,
That's
you
fine.
know, because you know, I in doing these, I know that somebody in the audience can reap from some of the things that we've been through. So I try to think of the right questions to ask that after listening to your story. So first and foremost, mental health, self-care. You went into the system around age 2, you know, or had experiences. Let me backtrack. Had experiences and stuff like that starting at age 2. From that journey to your earliest experience with some kind of youth engagement, Youth Thrive, you know, programs that promoted, you know, advocacy, you know, resiliency, motivation, a plan, a path, you know, self-care. In those moments, I'm looking at this timeline from there to there. What did mental health and self-care look like for yourself?
While I was in the system.
Go ahead. Yep.
When I was in the system, it really didn't exist. I mean, again, they were cookie cutter options, right? Go to therapy, tell your story to this person. It may not be your therapist tomorrow, but we still expect you to go to therapy and share your deepest, darkest secrets with this person. Okay.
That caught it a little bit late for me. You're like, it may not be your therapist tomorrow. What? Oh, okay, all right.
It may not be your person tomorrow. Then when you're in programming, it's kind of like how do we do coping skills? Okay, like coping skills, music seems to be one of your coping skills. And that's great for outside of here, but we don't allow you guys to have music in here. So how are you going to figure out a different coping skill, right? Like it's just these different standards and practices that they place on everybody that just doesn't get to what young people need, right? I think the mental health piece, I mean, I think everyone needs a therapist, and a therapist doesn't mean someone sitting in an office, right? A therapist could be your sister, a therapist could be your friend, right? Someone who you can have confidence in and confide in about the things that you are experiencing and processing, and maybe get a little bit of guidance, right? But everyone needs an ear to listen. The self-care piece, I mean, really, I was conditioned in these institutional settings that self-care is an incentive for behavior. It's not something that people are obligated to have. It's a luxury. It's a luxury of behavior, and it's a luxury of you being respectful and responsible, and all of those different things. And so when I got out of the system, I thought self-care was being able to take a shower by myself, right, while my partner had the baby. I thought self-care meant that I was going to, do a face mask. Today, I feel completely different. Those things are I would say maintenance of like hygiene, right? And so the conditions that the system set as like this precedent is maintenance and hygiene are self-care, right? And so I had to release those things and say, no, I deserve to have a body scrub. Okay, I deserve to have conditioner for my hair. I deserve to be able to have a face mask, right? If my skin is breaking out or I need a little bit of extra moisture, right? Like I need those things to feel comfortable. Those are mandatory if I can afford them, right? Like those things are mandatory for hygiene and self-care and maintenance, right? Self-care today for me looks like going out to have a drink by myself or with a friend, because I don't usually have that luxury. Going out and exploring a museum with a friend of art, because I don't always have that luxury because I'm busy. Going and investing in myself to go on a trip to have an experience and live life and get creative. Those are self-care things because they are out of the ordinary things that I do because I am busy, I have kids, and I have responsibilities, right? So my outlook on self-care is really being able to have intentional moments that I focus on myself, whether that's self-reflection, self-growth, experiences, all of these different things. And I'm just so ashamed that the system allows people to feel like a shower or a face mask or doing your toenails are luxuries, and those are self-care. And that's truly how I feel about it.
Thank you. Thank you so
Mhm.
much for sharing that. And you spoke about it before me even asking. I speak about self-care and mental health a lot. And I speak about it in a more fluid sense because I had a therapist. Therapy didn't fully work how I would love it to for myself, but I still believe in it. You know, my self care and my therapy kind of correlates with my faith. You
Mm,
know, I
mm,
have people around me that I can tie into talking about God that helps me in a therapeutic sense. You
mhm,
know, self care for me, um, being institutionalized and even not even because society has a way, and that's a conversation to be brought up. But I'm not going to dive too deep into it. But I am going to highlight it. Society has a way of institutionalizing minority populations of people without them having to have been in a jail cell or prison. Like just by you being in a certain bracket of income, you can find yourself institutionalized by certain mindsets and thought process. With that being said, I'll let y'all chew on that. We'll talk about that some other time. But I've learned that just like you said, like, going to get a pedicure or a manicure, these things like those are temporary fixes. So, when I think about self-care, those aren't going to really help me in the long term. But stepping out of my comfort zone, to go out, to build a social community, to have fellowship will help me in the long term, because now I'm building a sense of community, because I can't speak today. That will help me. Hopefully, when I'm in crisis, I can go to these people. I have friendship now because I've taken the time to build self care, but also to build relationships. Which
Mhm.
leads me to my next question. We all have been there, and we all have journeyed through. But you spoke about motherhood. You spoke about, having relationships and what have you. What has been that journey for you as a person with lived experience? Navigating from your own experience and probably, I don't want to assume, but not having the best examples
Yeah.
of, functionality, and trying to break generational cycles,
Mhm.
being a mother. So what has that looked like for you being a mother, but also being a partner in relationships and friendships or what have you?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good question, Michael. And I'm gonna keep it real. On the motherhood spectrum, A1. I'm not even gonna toot my own horn. I'm just gonna say I'm a bomb mom. Okay. I'm a bomb mom because
I love that.
not only am I being intentional about the love that I cultivate into my children, I know exactly what I do not want to be, right? I know
Mhm.
exactly how I want to pour into my kids because I've experienced the lack thereof. At the same time, I'm I wouldn't say I'm hard on my kids, but I have high expectations of my kids because I want to see them grow to their full potential, right? And that's something that the system didn't do for me, right? Like
Mhm.
their expectations were go to school and don't have police contact, right? My expectations for my kids are be kind, be courageous, speak up, stand up for yourself, right? I'm very like speak about it, don't just get upset. Oh, um, And so having all of these different aspects and experiences of what I don't want to be and learning from other people's mistakes, learning from the system's mistakes, I feel like I'm doing a great job cultivating my kids into being amazing individuals and human beings and knowing that they are loved at home. I would say in relationships, in terms of romantic relationships, they have been healthy, right? And communication and being able to put in 50-50 has been extremely beneficial on both ends. But it has also led to some endings of relationships, right? Because I've been able to identify the worth that I have, and not be bypassed by others, and let go of the baggage that does not serve me, if you want me to be completely real and transparent. I would say in friendships, though, being intentional about friendships is something that I continue to work on as an individual, right? Showing up for people in the moments that I don't really want to, right? Someone's like, oh my gosh, I need help packing up my house. And I'm sitting here on the computer and I'm like, dang, I have like 3 invoices to do and I have 2 meetings to prep for tomorrow. I don't feel like coming to your house, but being the friend and being the person that understands what it means to not have anybody show up or not have anyone to call on, I go anyway, right? Being very intentional and thoughtful in the people that support me as much as I support them has been a journey. I would say probably 4 or 5 years ago, I was not the friend I am today. And that's because it took intentional self-growth, and intentional inward looking at myself to say, if you expect this out of other people or your community, you have to deliver that you're as well, right? Especially in a relationship. So I think it is completely normal for people to not know how to build true, genuine friendships when they're coming out of the system, right? I think it is completely normal that it is a learning journey for everybody. But when you take steps every day to improve it on yourself, in 5 years, you're going to be like, I did what 5 years ago, right? Like my friends know I show up for them no matter what, right? So, and then also, being able to set clear boundaries on healthy relationships and being able to set clear boundaries and remove yourself from things that do not serve you is absolutely key, because again, it's cliche, but misery loves company. But if people are not willing to grow with you, then it is okay to put yourself first just because they're not willing to grow with you, and love them from a distance, right? Forgiveness and love from a distance. And that's literally how I live my life.
Definitely. I truly love that. And like I said, I try to ask my questions out of intentionality, because I know these are things that we struggle with, and even though we all have our unique stories, there is some similarities within relationships, within mental health, and even physical health, because a lot of us, if you didn't know a lot about your family, have a hard time. And then I'm gonna pick on myself here. Had a hard time when I would get asked going in for physicals, what is your family history? Well, hell, if I know. Well, and literally telling the doctor, yeah, look, I promise you, I would tell him, well, I'm black, so whatever in that category, it's me. I'm pretty sure somebody had to have it. So let's just start from there. Um, but that's just the real. Like, we struggle with some of these things because we don't have the answers. There's no right book. There's no guide to parenting. There's no guide to building friendships. There's no guide to building a relationship because they're so unique. Even if there was one, who's to say it will work for you?
Okay.
So I speak about not using the word success, because it's not linear, and sometimes it can come off as toxic positive, especially in a child welfare sense, because they're like, in order to be successful, you got to go to college. In order to be successful, you got to do. No. I challenge you guys as listening to this episode and understanding some of these things that were brought up, that finding your own path towards thriving in your relationship, in your parenting style, in your friendships, your acquaintanceships, whoever, whatever you got going on, relationships with your pets, your dog, your goldfish. I challenge you to find what works for you. And challenge yourself.
Can I
Because
add
a lot of it, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to add and say my path and the way that I live, right? I shared a little bit about how I carry myself. That is what works for me. But when you are institutionalized or when you have a system experience, sometimes it takes a trial and error. Listen, I thought sitting reading a book at the park might have been some self-care for me. And it didn't work. I was like, this ain't it. This ain't it. Coloring in this book is not it, right? Like doing this is not it. It takes some trial and error. But once you like what you like, right? I like sparkly stuff. Okay. Like if I find something sparkly, I like what I like, it takes trial and error. So I just want to say that, Michael, you are 100% right. What works for me might not work for you. And what works for you might not work for him. And what works for him might not work for her. But being able to be comfortable and to explore that for ourselves and find what works is going to put you on a path of just holistic well-being. And that is what I hope that every single individual on this planet can reach, is holistic well-being, whether that's mental, physical, emotional, all of those aspects, right? I hope that everyone can reach that, and it just takes some exploration.
Definitely. I just, being mindful of your time. I know we started a little bit late here, but I truly appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with me. We uplifted a couple of different things. So I feel like, we got something here for some people to listen to. So whether you like this part of the conversation, you like that part, I promise you want to leave listening to this episode without something to take from it. And the conversation will continue. I believe you, Bobbie, being one of the individuals that I would love to have back. I would love to have you back to ask me questions. You being the host seat. And to just get y'all a little chime, I'm trying to get that with a couple different people. Kind of switching that seat around. For some other people to step in and be some host and ask some hard questions because some people have asked me like, well, Michael, you don't share your story a lot. I feel like I share, like between all these episodes, I've shared enough of my story, but I guess it's not enough. So I'm gonna try within season 3. I'm not gonna say season 2 because it's almost over. Season 3 to kind of get into that, having some round tables, having some more deeper conversations with individuals in their own story, but also pulling out my story, for some of you guys to better get to know me and my mission and what I feel is my calling. A couple things before we end, COVID's out there, is doing its thing. Please be safe. Wear your mask, get your sanitizer, wash your hands, be careful. I love all of you guys. We all are a part of this big village. So it just takes you doing your part. The next person will follow suit. Before I end it all, we did talk about some things that could be potentially triggering. So if something did trigger you, or spark something, take some time to get back into baseline, do some mindfulness techniques, do some self-care techniques. If and all is still on your mind, feel free to reach out to me. I would love to help you find the right resource or have a conversation with you to help you, or if you are wanting to start the process of healing from your trauma, I would love to help you, in any way, shape, or form that I can. So feel free to reach out. Outside of that, this has been season 2, episode 28 of Resilient Voices and Beyond. I truly appreciate you being on here. And before I forget, because I don't want to leave this out, what advice would you like to leave here? And any last comments you have for the audience, and any last comments if you got a book, a song, a rap song, you dress job, or got a poetry, whatever, how they can follow you.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. My computer's about to die. So if I skate off of here, it's because my computer died and I can't find it. I would say my last words of wisdom are believe in yourself, be defiant of what the system's expectations were of you, because you are more than that. And back to kind of what Michael and I were talking about earlier, explore yourself, explore your wants, your desires, what food makes you happy, what clothes make you feel the best, what self-care is for you personally. I would say take the time to explore yourself and really enjoy life in all the different ways that it can be enjoyed. And I would say a book, The 4 Pivots, is an incredible book. And I would definitely encourage you all to read it. But at this point, I'm going to say thank you so much, Michael, for having me. This has been truly a pleasure, and the hour went by so fast. So thank you for having me.
No problem. Well, I know your computer is about to die. So you guys have a good night, good morning, good whenever you listen to this. This has been Resilient Voices and Beyond. Talk to you guys soon. Thank you.